Next, we have the first of our territorial and provincial panels. Very honored this year to have both the Yukon return and British Columbia. Very exciting regions in Canada with incredible track record for making great mineral discoveries. So allow me to introduce the moderator for the next panel. Andrew Cheatle is Senior Vice President for Africa for Forbes Manhattan Group. As a professional geoscientist and a graduate of the Royal School of Mines at Imperial College, right here in London, so sort of a homecoming for you being here today. Andrew's worked extensively in the exploration and mining industry, from the rock face to the boardroom and into the halls of government. Andrew's 25-plus-year career has encompassed both the senior and junior mining sectors as an exploration geologist, a mine geologist and manager, and a mining executive. Thank you for joining us here today, Andrew.
Thank you, and Anthony, thank you for the very kind introduction, and congratulations on this event as it goes from strength to strength. And it's nice to be on Canadian soil in the UK. Could I invite our panel up, please? Just the executives and the Premier. Thank you. Just whilst our panel's coming to the stage, just a few words about the Yukon, which I've had the pleasure of visiting. And if I may, do touch base with Anne and pick this booklet up. 9 fascinating facts about the Yukon, and about 9 reasons why you should invest in the Yukon. But some of the statistics of the Yukon are quite staggering. I think my favorite is that the Yukon is twice the size of the United Kingdom and has a population, if I'm correct, Premier, of 45,000? 41,000. That wouldn't quite fill Stamford Bridge football ground, but I don't really want to think about Chelsea. So it's half the size of Wembley Stadium. Just think about that for a moment. Twice the size of the UK and a population that would fill half of Wembley Stadium. So it's a real frontier, and of course legendary from the Klondike, but we're going to have our CEOs talk about their new discoveries, their developing mines, and why the Yukon is such a great place to be. But first, Premier, I believe you're going to have a few words, and if I may, it's a great honor to introduce you. And I'm going to go to the script here because it really is fascinating. So Premier Silver's appointment was effective of December the 3rd in 2016. But not only is he the Premier, he is also the Minister responsible for the Executive Council Office, which includes Aboriginal relations and intergovernmental relations, and the Department of Finance. And whilst he's living and working in a small, vibrant community of Dawson, the capital of the Yukon, or the biggest city rather, is Whitehorse of 35,000. I think Dawson's, what, about 15? 2,000. Yes, very small. But he's also been very active and involved in the education space and the First Nation communities, and has supervised practicums for the Yukon Native Teacher Education Program, and was involved with the Klondike Justice Department and Restorative Justice. So he's also a very dedicated participant in the Klondike moose hide gatherings, which I'd love to hear about some other time. But Premier, it's your time to speak. Let's hear about the Yukon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. I'm very delighted to be here with a great panel to discuss our territory. First, I'll start with where we are. Of course, we're in Canada's northwest, and we're right next door to Alaska. I like to describe it as we are British Columbia's hat. As Andrew said, we are very large geographical area with a very, very small population. But it's absolutely my privilege to be the MLA, the member of the Legislative Assembly for a very historic region of Klondike. And again, to be there today in such a progressive economy and political atmosphere as well. Yukon is amongst the top 10 most attractive mining regions worldwide for investors, according to the Fraser Institute's 2018 Mineral Investment Attractiveness Index. Now, there are many reasons for that, and I'd like to highlight a few for you today. We have significant geological potential. We have ongoing investment in infrastructure. We have a very, very strong government-to-government relations with our First Nations, our Indigenous communities. There's political stability, as I mentioned, and regulatory clarity as well. Yukon is vast, as we were just explained, that it is twice the size of the UK. Natural Resources Canada estimates that Yukon hosted 8% of Canada's exploration and deposit appraisal activity for 2018. We have a very strong mineral sector ecosystem that is supported by our government. The government's Yukon Geological Survey provides the public geological data for over 2,700 mineral occurrences in the territory. This data provides baseline for many of tomorrow's discoveries. We are also de-risk early stage development through Yukon mineral exploration programs, which provides huge leverage funding to the industry for those early stage projects. In 2019-20, this funding enabled $5 million in early stage exploration projects throughout the Yukon. Yukon can seem to be quite far away. However, it's not as isolated as you would think. Our capital city, Whitehorse, has an international airport with daily flights from Vancouver, as well as regular flights from Edmonton, Calgary, Victoria, Kelowna. We also receive direct flights from Germany in the summer. There are also 28 government-maintained airports and aerodomes, as well as private airstrips throughout the territory. We are paving the runway currently as we speak in Dawson City, which is great for the mining industry as well for tourism as well. Yukon's mining industry can access 3 ice-free deep water ports, which are also the closest North American ports to the primary Asian markets. We can shave 4 days off of travel time compared to Vancouver. To the Asian markets. Now, the territory also has 3,000 miles of government-maintained highways and roads, and they are in the midst of significant upgrades. We have a program right now called the Yukon Resource Gateway Project, which is funded by Government of Canada and Yukon, and also by industry being represented here at the table, that will provide $500 million worth of road and infrastructure upgrades. This project increases the access to areas of high mineral potential, and an important strength that I'm very, very particularly proud of is our steadfast government-to-government relationships with Yukon's Indigenous population. These relationships are underpinned by constitutionally protected modern treaties and self-governing agreements that provide strong legal foundation for collaboration and decision-making in the management of Yukon's land and resources. They also provide transparency. Another advantage for investors alongside our stable regulatory system and also a very competitive tax regime. In our first year of our mandate, we reduced the small business tax by 33%. I could go on, and I love going on about the Yukon and the Klondike regions, but I will let the panel of my esteemed colleagues here help me to bestow the virtues of the mining industry in Yukon. But in closing, I want to be very clear that the Yukon represents the premier North American jurisdiction for all of your mining concerns. And I look forward to hearing from the panelists and also your views about the advantages of investing in Yukon. Thank you very much.
Premier, thank you very much. I think that's the first time I've seen a politician cut short a speech. Thank you. Well, we do have an esteemed panel of CEOs, gentlemen that are from the frontier. We've got the beards on the right, the clean-shaven on the left. And just starting, Graham, with yourself, if we could just have a very brief introduction, who you are, and one sentence highlight about your company.
So, thank you very much. My name is Graham Downs. I'm the president CEO of ATAC Resources. We have a large gold and polymetallic project in north-central Yukon, Canada's only Carlin-style mineralization, and we'll be actively drilling this year.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Paul Wessels, President and CEO of Western Copper and Gold. Western Copper and Gold is developing one asset, which is the casino asset. We've been developing it for about 10 years. We're currently in permitting. This is a very large copper-gold deposit containing a total of 18 million ounces of gold and 10 billion pounds of copper. Thanks.
Thank you.
Brandon Macdonald, CEO of Fireweed Zinc. We have a large zinc-lead silver project in eastern Yukon, host to about 4.5 million tons of contained zinc and lead, making it one of the largest deposits in the world of this type held by a junior.
John McConnell, CEO of Victoria Gold. I think I'm probably the of this panel enjoying life the most right now. We are fully financed and building what will be the Yukon's largest gold mine ever, producing over 200,000 ounces of gold per year. And our first gold pour will be in September, so a few short months away.
Well, congratulations. And so the Yukon is a global, according to the Fraser Institute rankings, a global top 10 investment destination. And I know how the rankings work, and of course you would have all participated in that. So, if you may, let's have some open conversation. What makes the Yukon so attractive? Why did you rank it so high? Maybe, Brandon, maybe I could ask you to start the conversation.
Yeah, I guess there's a variety of prerequisites required for a jurisdiction to be highly regarded. I guess I would first mention prospectivity or mineral endowment. It does not matter your regulatory regime or the ease of permitting or whatever. If there is no mineral endowment, there is no attraction for investment. Mm-hmm. So the Yukon is a very large territory, has already demonstrated significant mineral endowment potential and incredible prospects for more. So I think that's probably driving a lot of that.
Yeah. Would you agree, Paul?
Yeah, the other thing I would add is that it came in at number 8 this year, and that was actually an improvement over the previous years. And I think one of the knocks against the Yukon is people are worried about the infrastructure up in the Yukon. And as Premier Silver talked about, there's been a big investment both from the Government of Canada and the Government of Yukon into this Resource Gateway project, which is 3 very, very important roads that really open up very, very rich mineral areas. And if you look at the mineral area where we are, in that area within sort of a 50-kilometer radius, there's 25 million ounces of gold in resource in that area. So and that's where 2 of these roads are going. So I think it's measures like that that have continued to actually move the Yukon up in the rankings over this year as opposed to previous years.
Great.
I would just echo the mineral potential and the stable jurisdiction. I think the world's getting smaller and smaller these days, and it's getting harder and harder to find deposits in friendly jurisdictions. And I think with the rich history of mineral exploration and placer mining in the Yukon, it's a welcome place to find new deposits. And just from my short experience of since the 90s in the Yukon, I mean, the amount of places and areas that you can still find new deposits. I mean, just the fact that we've, found Canada's only Carlin-style mineralization into 2010. I mean, it just shows you. And flying back and forth from these places and around the Yukon, there's vast areas and there's a lot of potential to find new deposits in the Yukon. It's incredible.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And John, as you said, you're building the mine. Nearly finished.
Yeah, I think we're the poster child for investment in the Yukon. We acquired the property in 2009. Between 2009 and 2018, we were able to raise more than $150 million to move the project through exploration, feasibility study, permitting. And then we were able to raise $500 million to build the mine. So, people looked at the jurisdiction very favorably. Groups like Orion Mine Finance and Osisko Gold Royalties made big bets on Victoria and our team to execute, but they paid close attention to the jurisdiction we're in.
Very good. And of course, Premier, you must be very happy to be in the top 10, but what are you going to do to become in the top 3?
I think just keep on keeping on. One of our best resources is our human resources, whether it's the local knowledge of the indigenous population or the exploration population as well. We have on the ground construction companies, ground truthers, the juniors, the strengths of decades of the juniors corporations. This jurisdiction is advanced already just with its human resources. The Geological Survey, we have Carol and Ralph here representing the Geological Survey, world-class maps and resources. So again, you can land on the ground and be immersed in a very professional climate of personnel and you know, again, like we say, the regulatory certainty is what we have to keep on working on as a government. Relationships with First Nations populations and governments, that's what we have to continue to work on. But again, we have so many advantages compared to other jurisdictions when it comes to the human resources in our region.
Yeah, you've mentioned there the First Nation relationships, and they are very important, and particularly the Indigenous relationships are certainly looked at from outside as being very important, particularly institutions such as the United Nations. But the front line, of course, is and where those communities meet is on your properties and your projects. And perhaps I could also just ask, how are the relations, and what do you do, and how do you go about developing skills in the region? Maybe John, John, let's start with you, because you've got a large workforce now.
Well, my relationship with the new chief in the NND is not very good right now, because I was in Singapore last week and he phoned me at what was 3 o'clock in the morning, so I had to give him hell. And then I get to London this week and he thinks I'm still in Singapore, so he phones me again, and it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and he likes to FaceTime. So there I am in bed, talking to him, you know, bedhead, and anyway, we have a great relationship with the First Nation we work with. You know, I can honestly say many of the members of the First Nation are friends of mine. I own a home in the community, so I spend a lot of time there, and we continually work on our relationship.
Let's carry on the line. Brendan.
Yeah, I think that all of us have done a lot of work in Yukon, and the more work you do there, the more various projects you work on. You develop deep roots and good friendships. Myself, I'm the community of Ross River, which is the home of the Ross River Dene Council First Nation, is actually originally my hometown. So we knew them very well, and I think that when you're working on one project the next and you spend so much time in the community, and particularly with such a small population, you cannot escape getting to know these people. So that helps build the solid relationships, because it's not something you can just drop in on, have your meeting, and then worry about it next time you have your next meeting. It's a perpetual need to engage and a respect, because these are your community residents and friends. And I think that this is driven in part by the fact that's what we want to do, but it's also driven by the fact that it is a new imperative of the world, and it's not just the United Nations. I had a meeting in Japan last year, and I was trying to explain this hot new drill hole we had done, and my counterpart in the meeting said, the project's very good. How are things with the First Nations, and how are things going on your road improvement? So even as far as Japan, they know that these things are absolute necessity, right? So whether you're driven by moral imperative or financial imperative, you have to have those relationships.
Yeah, it's very, very well said. Thank you. Paul, just taking this theme still and the relationships, there's been a lot of land claim settlement in the Yukon. What does that mean, and what does it mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember the exacts. It's 13 out of the 15 First Nations have settled. 11 out of the 13. I knew it was two odd numbers. And so what that means is that when you're developing a project, there's boundaries. It's clearly cut in terms of the First Nations that you need to engage with and you need to consult with. And I mean, that's part of what that means. The other part of what that means is that when you enter the regulatory phase, when you actually go through the environmental assessment, the First Nations are actually fully scoped into that assessment. So that process, the environmental assessment process in the Yukon, is unique to the Yukon. The way that the First Nations governments are woven into that process is unique to the Yukon and unique to Canada. So it gives you some certainty. It gives you a lot of certainty as compared to other regions where you don't have those settlements with the First Nations.
Yeah, thank you. Graham.
Yeah, I mean, I would just echo the comments across the panel here. I mean, it's really just about building trust and building like any relationship, and doing what you're going to say and and that's the most important thing. And we've been doing that for over 10 years. We're an exploration story. We have exploration cooperation agreements, and we continue to build that, but it's just maintaining relationships and just doing the right thing. I think we were one of the first or second groups that's done a joint decision document working with the First Nation on settlement lands with the potential road route. So that's really exciting, and it's just really asking the First Nation, you know, here's a road into new territory. How would you like to do it? Can we work with you? Is this something you want to do? And, you know, it's, again, just comes back to relationships.
Yeah, I think those relationships are very, very key. Of course, if we do work correctly and properly in the mining side of things, of course, we help to build community and develop nation. And the conversation is very key to that. So I'm going to just go a little off script, if I may, and say, you have the Premier here. What's one thing would you like to ask him? Don't be shy.
Well, I have a few things. No.
What can the government do to continue to help you?
I mean, I think it's just to continue on with working on getting the regulatory regimes. I mean, as junior mining companies, we always want to get things done faster, but we also understand the climate's changing on permitting and environmental standards, and it's really just kind of keeping up with that. I mean, it's well known in almost every jurisdiction. We just want to streamline things, and the government's working hard at that, and that's what's important. That's all we ask, is just to kind of continue doing that, working with the different agencies throughout the Yukon and seeing what can be done better, just like any company.
Yeah, I mean, the reason you heard silence is that the Premier is, and you know, with 40,000 people, the Premier is pretty accessible. So if we want to ask him a question, we ask him a question right away. So we don't have a lot of pent-up sort of questions that we want to ask him right here. You know, and I mean, obviously, I'd echo, you know, questions on regulatory issues. I mean, the advantage of the Yukon is that there's certainly regulatory certainty in terms of, I think, outcomes. What there isn't is in terms of timelines. And, you know, I think everyone here will agree that the permitting timelines should be reduced. But I guess the other push would be, I mean, it's been a great initiative with, you know, some of the infrastructure development that we've seen. Let's keep that going. There's certainly, you know, other areas and other infrastructure investments that could be made to benefit the industry.
Yeah, I think to echo Paul's point, you can imagine if this was a Nevada panel, what are the odds you'd have the governor up here? You know, do any small explorer developers in Nevada have access to that level of government? So, you know, we're able to interact with government on the highest level in a way that other jurisdictions, it would be mind-boggling to them that's even possible. You know, so for our project, you know, we have ongoing infrastructure needs that the government has been very responsive on, and we're looking forward to more response on. And it's that you can lobby and chat with the government is fantastic in that regards.
Yeah, I'd just echo that. You know, Sandy and I, my family, you know, has a placer operation in his riding, so, you know, we see him a lot. He actually married my wife and I 10 months ago. So, you know, and we don't agree at all on a lot of things, but we do agree that, you know, mining is necessary in the Yukon, and I think the fact that he's here should demonstrate that the Yukon is open for business.
Yeah, it's very important. And Premier, of course, you have lots of calls on your time. You choose to be here. What is your motivation? Why are you here?
As goes mining, so goes the Yukon. We have a long history of mining in the Yukon. It's very important to our economy. As a territory, we're on a territorial formula financing from Ottawa, and we want to have more own source revenue. And the way to get own source revenues is through better relations with First Nations and better relations with both junior and major mining corporations. You know, there's not a panelist here that doesn't have my cell phone number. We talk all the time. The chiefs as well. They all are close personal friends as well. It's a small, tight-knit community. Some of the problems that we have are the fact that the economy is booming. We have the lowest unemployment rate in Canada, and we're trying to get $300 million worth of asset construction out as a government each year, and it's hard to continually keep up with a progressive industry. So these are really good problems to have. Those close, tight-knit relationships are going to be the keys to that success. The ability for us to negotiate with modern treaties is an exceptional situation where we can take a look at not just relationships with governments, but also relationships with equity stakes in the First Nations development corporations when it comes to developing not only royalty partnerships, but also community partnerships in developing subdivisions and developing the resources to allow our Yukoners to flourish, but also our Yukoners to come back. I got to give John, and everybody here kudos, but with Victoria Gold, they have a great, brilliant campaign right now going on nationally saying, hey, Yukoners, it's time to come home. For a long time, our workforce was going to other jurisdictions to find employment. Now it's time to come home because it's just an excellent opportunity and the economy is booming because of mining. That's why I'm here. It's very important to our jurisdiction.
And you've also been, for many years now, for example, obviously Anne and the Yukon Mining Association, been at these events time and time again through changes of government even. So this is an initiative that transcends changing government?
Yeah, I mean, again, one of the unique circumstances in the North that any government needs to wrap its head around is that modern treaties. 40 years ago, the chiefs went down to Ottawa with a document called Together Today for Our Children Tomorrow. This is a document that outlines colonialism to date 40 years ago, but also a pathway forward. Not a handout, but a hand up so that governments can work together. That document started the beginnings of these self-governing agreements. We have over 2 decades of self-governing in the Yukon, which represents half of the self-governing nations in all of Canada. That's very important, and it's a strategic advantage that we have when it comes to regulatory certainty. We have, because of these modern treaties, the Umbrella Final Agreement, which is protected under the Canadian Constitution, we have one-stop shopping for water. We have one-stop shopping for environmental policy. You can't get this in other jurisdictions in Canada. There's always things to work on. We're trying to streamline those processes as much as we possibly can, but it's the sophistication of these documents and the sophistications of any governments that are working together that is going to help alleviate the concerns of the financial districts, but also helps us in moving these projects towards production quicker.
Yep, thank you very much. Now, Yukon is quite famous here in the UK for Yukon Gold. In fact, my one with Ice Road Truckers is one of my mum's favourite programs. So, you're a real-life Yukon Gold digger. How's that changed your life?
I know all the TV miners, and they're an interesting bunch. A couple of them are actually not bad miners, but most of them are actors. And but it is great for the economy of the Yukon. Not only brings tours, but they spend a lot of money in the Yukon, doing their TV shows.
Yeah, certainly. Any of you also had a go at alluvial mining? Yep.
That's the one great thing about the Yukon. You can come from any background, and if you have the ability or the wherewithal to want to try something new, that's the type of community that will allow it. One of my first years up in Yukon, I was teaching in Dawson City, teaching high school math, and that summer I went out and one of the actual real miners on that TV show hired me, and I ran an excavator and ran a small trommel system, so it was a great opportunity to get in there and get to know the mining community. A very strong part of the Dawson culture is our placer miner community.
I will point out that he went back to teaching very quickly.
I'm a better teacher.
So you didn't find much gold then, obviously, no?
We found gold. It was interesting. That was a year where gold was under $300 an ounce, and the efficiencies of the New Zealand miners and the trommel system, you kept that industry going through those more meek years.
Very good. Well, we have just 5 minutes left, 5 panelists. Maybe I can invite each of you just to close up with your thoughts on the Yukon and maybe another few words about your companies. Starting over with you, just we'll work our way and finish with the Premier.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's an exciting year for the Yukon. I think with John's coming to production, I think it's been a long time since the Yukon's had something like this put into production. I mean, 200,000 ounces a year, it's a big mine, and John's doing an amazing job getting this built up. So we're finally going to have that mine up and running, and you can get these things done. There's power, and the government's working on roads. I mean, the Yukon is an incredible jurisdiction to be in, and it's going to do a lot for the Yukon, so we're excited about it. I mean, we're just to the northeast of Victoria Gold and the Eagle and Alexco, and yes, things are tough out there, but we've got 14 million in cash. We're going to be doing a discovery drilling this year. I mean, and then with all the other groups here, there's a lot going on and a lot to look forward to for the Yukon, so it's going to be a great year.
Good, thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, I would just echo what Graham is saying. I mean, you've heard all morning, even if you're a mid-tier gold producer, how difficult it is to raise capital in these markets. And we were talking the other day in the fact that all the major Yukon exploration companies were able to raise money, including ourselves, this year. So I think it's going to be one of the few jurisdictions where there's going to be quite a bit of active exploration this year. John's building a mine. We've got, Newmont permitting the coffee project. A lot of exploration and a lot of potential there. And I think that, the reason that we've all been able to raise money is that the potential of the Yukon, our ability, with some government help to continue to get out and get our story out has been important. And really, it's the potential there is very, very significant. And so I think that it's going to be an exciting year, and look forward to seeing results from really a number of Yukon explorers this year.
Brandon, thank you very much, Paul.
Yeah, one of the chief challenges when marketing the Yukon for a long time had been nobody doubted the geological potential, but it was where are the mines, right? So can you build a mine in Yukon? With John's operations nearly, the construction nearly done, and potential restarts at Keno, and advanced permitting with Western Copper and Gold and BMC and Selwyn Chihong, and I think very soon there's going to be quite a bit going on, and it makes life easier for those of us in the advanced exploration progressing to development to be able to point and say, no, look, it can be done, and it can be done well. That makes our life a lot easier. A project like ours, this is a preeminent zinc exploration transitioning to development stage project, and it's where you're starting to get the money who's not concerned about the hot drill hole. They're concerned about, okay, great, when can you build it, and can you get it permitted? And so to see the successes and the additional ones in the pipeline is a big victory for us, and I think is really going to get people looking seriously at the jurisdiction broadly as well.
Good. Thank you very much, Brendan. Yeah, good points. John.
Yeah, I think I would just be repeating what my colleagues have said, so I'll give my 5 minutes over to the Premier to conclude.
It's just 1 minute.
So that's 6 I have then.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Premier, final minute.
Yeah, I just again, it's an honor to be up here with these gentlemen. I guess I just want to say that there's never been a better time to invest in the Yukon. We have the experience of the junior companies. We have the infrastructure. We're working on every day advancing the lives of Yukoners through a greater equity stake with the indigenous populations in the mining industry, whether that be directly through royalties or involvement in mining projects directly, but also with the economic development branches of the First Nations governments, building into an independent power production policy, working on our infrastructure hand in hand with those governments and those communities. Like I say, it's just an honor to be the Premier of such a progressive area with such potential. So please, come on up.
Good, and thank you very much. It's been an honor to have you here. It's been an honor to have a panel of CEOs, and thank you very much for your time. Thank you.